When people think of development, they usually picture highways, skyscrapers, and economic growth. But true development is not only about numbers. It is about people. It is about whether individuals live with dignity, whether they have equal opportunities, and whether communities thrive together. And in this story of development, women are central. Women feed families, sustain communities, fight for justice, and lead change. Yet, throughout history, women's contributions have often been invisible. This lesson explores the place of women in development, how psychology and education theories shed light on their struggles, and how real-life stories from the Philippines show both the barriers and the possibilities for transformation. Let us begin by distinguishing growth from development. Growth is about expansion, more factories, more buildings, higher income. Development is broader. It asks, are people healthier, freer, more secure, more equal? Imagine a town where new industries bring in money. That is growth. But if the women in that same town are stuck in low-paying, unsafe jobs with no childcare and little chance to advance, then that is not development. Development must be people-centered, inclusive, and sustainable. Growth and development are often confused, yet the difference between them is crucial. Growth can happen without improving the lives of the majority. A country's GDP may rise because of foreign investment or a booming industry, but if inequality also rises, if poor communities remain hungry, and if women are excluded from opportunities, then the growth is hollow. Development, in contrast, asks whether progress is reaching everyone. It is not just about how much money is made but how that money translates into better living conditions for ordinary people. When women are left behind, true development is impossible. If they cannot access education, if their health needs are neglected, or if they are paid less than men for the same work, then the benefits of growth are unevenly distributed. This creates a cycle where women remain trapped in poverty, unable to break through to higher opportunities. Development also involves dignity and freedom. It is not only about infrastructure or technology but also about whether people have choices in their lives. For women, this might mean the freedom to choose whether to marry, the ability to pursue education, the right to own property, or the opportunity to participate in leadership. Without these freedoms, even the most modern and wealthy societies cannot be considered truly developed. Growth is about quantity, while development is about quality. Growth counts the money made and the buildings built. Development measures whether lives are improved, whether inequalities are reduced, and whether people, especially women, can reach their full potential. In the 1970s, the Women in Development or WID approach pushed for women to be included in development programs. This was important because women had been rendered invisible in planning. But often, women were treated as an add-on, not as equal partners. The Gender and Development or GAD approach, which followed, recognized that the real issue is not only including women but transforming unequal gender relations. GAD challenged structures of patriarchy and gave women agency as leaders and decision-makers. In the Philippines, policies like the Magna Carta of Women and the mandated gender and development budget reflect this shift. This shows us that women are not simply beneficiaries of development, they are essential architects of it. The WID framework was groundbreaking in its time because it finally acknowledged that women were central to national progress. However, it was also limited. By treating women as a separate sector rather than as half of society, it unintentionally reinforced the idea that development was primarily for men and that women were secondary actors. The GAD framework corrected this by placing gender equality at the center of policy and practice, asking how social systems, power structures, and cultural expectations could be transformed so that women and men participate as equals. In the Philippines, we see the impact of this shift in many sectors. Government agencies and local governments are required to allocate at least 5% of their budgets to gender and development programs. These funds are not just symbolic, they are used for training, services, and projects that address gender gaps. For example, GAD budgets may support livelihood programs for women farmers, safe spaces for women and children, or gender sensitivity workshops for employees. These initiatives aim to change the very conditions that keep women marginalized. We can also look at psychology to understand why this transformation matters. The self-determination theory in psychology explains that people thrive when they have autonomy, competence, and relatedness. When women are excluded from decision-making, they lose autonomy. When their skills are undervalued, they lose competence. When they are isolated from leadership spaces, they lose relatedness. GAD policies that give women a voice in governance and community planning help restore these psychological needs, which in turn strengthen both personal well-being and collective progress. One of the stark realities worldwide is the feminization of poverty. Women are disproportionately represented among the poor because of lower wages, lack of property rights, and the heavy weight of unpaid care work. According to the United Nations, women perform about 3/4 of the world's unpaid labor. In the Philippines, this is visible in urban poor communities. Women often juggle small sari-sari stores, laundry services, or piecework jobs while also raising children and managing households. During the pandemic, when livelihoods collapsed, women bore the brunt of lost income and increased caregiving duties. Here, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is very helpful to understand the situation. Maslow said people must first meet their basic needs like food and safety before they can climb to higher levels of belonging, esteem, and finally self-actualization. If women are constantly struggling at the bottom levels, worrying about where the next meal will come from, whether their family will survive illness, or whether they will be safe from violence, they cannot reach self-actualization. Their potential to lead, create, and flourish is cut short. True development must therefore remove these barriers so women can rise beyond survival toward full human fulfillment. To analyze this further, intersectionality, coined by Kimberly Crenshaw, is a powerful tool. It shows that women's experiences of poverty differ depending on their overlapping identities. A woman in Manila may struggle with gender discrimination at work, but her situation is not the same as that of a Moro woman in Mindanao, who may face religious prejudice, regional underdevelopment, and displacement due to conflict. Intersectionality teaches us that there is no single way women experience poverty. Instead, their struggles are shaped by multiple and interconnected systems of inequality. Psychology also helps us see the mental and emotional impact of prolonged deprivation. Martin Seligman's learned helplessness theory explains how repeated experiences of powerlessness can cause people to lose the will to change their circumstances. For many poor women, constant rejection when applying for credit, repeated job loss, or enduring domestic violence creates a cycle where they feel incapable of escaping poverty. Development, therefore, must not only provide resources but also restore a sense of agency and hope. Another helpful perspective is Amartya Sen's capability approach, which argues that development should be measured not only by economic growth but by people's real freedoms and abilities to live the lives they value. Under this lens, feminization of poverty is not only about lack of income but about limited capabilities, like the inability to pursue higher education, access healthcare, or participate in politics. For instance, a poor woman in an urban settlement may technically earn some income through informal labor, but if she cannot afford healthcare for her children, cannot join community decision-making, and cannot access public services, she is still deprived. The capability approach reminds us that true development empowers women to expand their choices and capabilities. Bringing these theories together gives us a fuller picture. Maslow helps us see the ladder of needs. Crenshaw reminds us that poverty is experienced differently depending on identity and context. Seligman shows us the psychological toll of prolonged disadvantage. And Sen offers a vision of development as freedom and capability, not just survival. When combined, these frameworks remind us that feminization of poverty is not a women's issue alone but a structural and multidimensional problem that society must address collectively. Women's lives are closely tied to the environment. They are often the ones responsible for gathering food, water, and fuel for their families. When the environment is damaged, they are the first to suffer. After Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, many women became leaders in their communities, organizing relief distribution and running communal kitchens. In Mindanao, Lumad women have been at the forefront of resisting destructive mining operations that poison rivers and destroy ancestral land. These stories remind us that women are not only victims of environmental crises, they are leaders in creating sustainable solutions. Globally, women produce over half of the world's food but own less than 1/5 of the land. In the Philippines, we see this in farming provinces like Nueva Ecija and Iloilo, where women work equally hard as men in rice fields but are often excluded from land titles. Agrarian reform programs frequently list only the husband as the farmer, erasing women's labor. An inspiring initiative addressing this issue is Rural Women Advocates, or RUWA. RUWA is a collective that gives voice to peasant women. They share stories of women farmers fighting for land rights, just wages, and food sovereignty. Through social media, RUWA highlights how women are not passive dependents but active defenders of life and livelihood. By amplifying these voices, RUWA challenges the mainstream narrative that often sidelines rural women. There remain many barriers that hinder women's full participation in development. Patriarchy still dictates that women should stay at home or prioritize domestic roles. In some rural areas, girls drop out of school to care for siblings or help with housework. Violence against women also persists, limiting their freedom and safety. And stereotypes continue to push women into certain professions, while men dominate fields like engineering and technology. Bandura's social learning theory explains how these patterns are passed down. Children learn by watching and imitating. If girls constantly see women portrayed as housewives or caregivers in media and in their communities, they internalize those roles. This shows how culture and socialization shape the opportunities women believe they can pursue. Despite these challenges, many Filipino women today embody the spirit of inclusive development. Maria Ressa, Nobel Peace Prize winner and journalist, stands as a symbol of courage in defending truth and democracy. By challenging disinformation and fighting for press freedom, she reminds us that development is impossible without transparency, accountability, and access to truthful information. Angel Locsin, a beloved actress, is also known for her humanitarian work. From disaster relief to food distribution, she used her platform and resources to directly respond to crises. Many Filipinos call her a real-life superhero, proving that development work is not only the domain of politicians but also of citizens who care deeply for others. Leila de Lima, despite being unjustly imprisoned for her political stance, has remained a vocal advocate for human rights and justice. Her resilience highlights that development is not just about economics. It is also about ensuring that human rights and democratic freedoms are protected. Risa Hontiveros has consistently championed women's rights, healthcare, and mental health in the Senate. She authored the Mental Health Law, which addressed a long-neglected area in Philippine development. Her advocacy shows how care for the vulnerable is integral to building a healthy society. Leni Robredo, as vice president, implemented Angat Buhay, a program that mobilized resources for education, health, and livelihood in poor communities. Her style of leadership emphasized empowerment and partnership, treating people not as dependents but as active participants in shaping their future. These women illustrate that leadership comes in many forms, through politics, journalism, humanitarian service, and advocacy. Each shows that when women lead, development becomes more inclusive, compassionate, and grounded in justice. Several theories help us better understand the role of women in development. Gender schema theory by Sandra Baim explains how people form mental frameworks about what men and women can or cannot do. If girls grow up believing that leadership belongs to men and caregiving belongs to women, they may unconsciously limit themselves. This shows the importance of challenging stereotypes from childhood onward. Standpoint theory tells us that marginalized groups, including women, have unique perspectives because of their lived experiences. A woman farmer who struggles with land rights, or a domestic worker who faces exploitation abroad, has insights into injustice and inequality that policymakers may never fully grasp. Their standpoint is a source of knowledge that should guide development policy. Ethics of Care by Carol Gilligan emphasizes that relationships, empathy, and compassion are powerful foundations for decision-making. Too often, development is guided by numbers and profit. But an ethic of care reminds us that true progress must prioritize human well-being, community bonds, and sustainability. Together, these theories highlight that women are not only participants in development but bring perspectives and values that can transform how development is understood and practiced. Development cannot be measured only by rising economic numbers or modern infrastructure. It must be judged by whether people live in dignity, equality, and freedom. Women are at the heart of this process, from the resilience of women in Ruwa, to the leadership of Risa Hontiveros and Lenny Robredo, to the courage of Maria Ressa and Leila de Lima, to the compassion of Angel Locsin. We see that women's contributions are indispensable. Their stories remind us that development is not abstract. It is lived. It is human. And it is only real when no one is left behind.